Hello and welcome to AM Prime here on WESN Content Capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me this morning as we get straight into the conversation. The Caribbean Domestic Workers Network is calling on regional nations, regional governments, to ratify the International Labour Organization's treaty or convention that recognizes and protects the rights and decent work conditions of domestic workers. Well, this morning I'm joined by the General Secretary of the National Union of Domestic Employees, Ms. Ida LeBlanc, to get an idea of where we're at as a nation here in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the protection of domestic workers. Ms. LeBlanc is with us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Well, thank you very much for joining me this morning, Ms. LeBlanc. Let's start the conversation speaking about domestic workers here in Trinidad and Tobago and the ratification of the ILO convention. It is suggested that domestic workers are the least protected of all unionized here in TNT and other nations around the Caribbean. Could you expand on that? And even though it is a suggestion, is there truth to it? Exactly how are they the least protected?
Well, first, the domestic workers are not considered as workers under the Industrial Relations Act. The Industrial Relations Act states that anyone who works in and around the house and paid by the householder is not a worker. We have taken part in CEDAW meetings, and we have got CEDAW to make a recommendation to our government since 2016 to amend the Industrial Relations Act to include domestic workers as workers within the law. We also was in the forefront in getting the ILO to have the adoption of the C-189, and that since 2011. And since then to now, we have been calling on our government to ratify the C-189 so that domestic workers can enjoy decent work like all other workers. And so far, we are talking to deaf ears.
What about the expanding on that? Because though we're still living a COVID-19 pandemic, you're mentioning prior to the pandemic since 2016, but during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, there was an understanding or realization of the vulnerability of workers here in Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension around the Caribbean and the wider world. How did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the status of domestic workers?
Well, the status remained the same, but they were. It was critical for domestic workers, meaning that they were treated badly, I must say, because what happened is that most of the domestic workers in the union would tell us that the employer want them to sleep in. Now, if they remain there and sleeping, who taking care of the children? Some of them was fired. We have matters where domestic workers were fired. And, we have it in the court. But because once you are not paid by the household and you are paid by the company, well, then you will be considered a worker. So that is the only way we could take a case to the Ministry of Labor and the court. And we find domestic workers are being continued to be treated badly because within the COVID was to call on our International Domestic Workers Federation to assist us with domestic workers here in Trinidad in terms of giving them hampers to ensure that they had something to eat. And also we started off helping them with giving them money to be entrepreneurs, to, make cake and sell, things like that. They did seasoning. Some of them who had enough space by the house, they were able to rear chickens and things. But it had a time when everything was shut down. And that and all they were affected by. So domestic workers had it rough during the COVID time.
Have things gotten better at all?
But things hasn't really gotten better, It's the same. It's the same. Because some people were still getting COVID And if the employer get COVID, the employer still want the domestic worker to come out to work, you know. And even though the domestic worker are afraid to go out to work and ask for a little sick leave or whatever, because they're so afraid, it never happens. And then a lot of them not paying the national insurance. And the national insurance must be paid back for domestic workers because they are wage earners. You know, and so that is a terrible experience for the domestic workers. So that when they reach 60 years, they're not entitled to a pension, right? We are calling on Social Security for all. You know, domestic workers must be able to enjoy these things. You know, and if they were injured on the job and they didn't pay national insurance, they have to stay home without pay because the employer would not pay them. So these are the issues that arise within the union that we have to take care, and our hands are tied because they are not considered as workers, the majority of domestic workers.
So I'll get back to the national insurance scheme in a moment because I think that's a very important point that you've raised. But just to get an idea for those who are watching, sometimes the strength of a union could actually be measured by its membership. What is the size of your membership or the numbers here of the Domestic Workers Union in TNT?
Well, the last time we did a little survey, it was over 30,000 domestic workers in Trinidad and Tobago. Now we have those Spanish-speaking domestic workers now coming into the country. And what is happening now is a confusion between the local and those who coming in, because people prefer to hire the Spanish-speaking domestic workers. Now why? Because they are not allowed to pay NIS for them. So, you know, employers get away with not paying NIS, and the local ones now are not getting all the jobs anymore. You know, so that and all in itself is big issue for the domestic workers here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now we have about around approximately 100 domestic workers in the union, but they are afraid for anybody to know that they are in the union. You know, so we always celebrate International Women's Day. Sometimes we go out there and march. And mostly will be the low-income workers that will come now to support the domestic workers and they themselves are afraid because it's so easy to get fired when the employer know that you're in a union and things like that. We don't have no law against that to say, well, we can help to protect the domestic workers. You know, so what we have to do, we have to have ongoing training, telling them about the laws, you know, what they could do and what they cannot do. And hoping that will build the confidence to stand up and say, well, I'm a union member. Because we do not only have domestic workers in our union, we also focus on low-income workers in the informal sector. And they are not treated, they are treated badly, just like domestic workers.
When you say low-income earners in the informal economy, what do you mean by that?
Well, low-income workers, well, that in itself, the low pay that they get. Most of them, the employer don't follow the minimum wage, which is $17.50 an hour, and overtime and things like that. So these workers remain sometimes the groceries. You know, these places will hire most of the workers, you know, who remain, we have to say, low-income workers because they don't get the overtime, they don't get vacation leave, they don't get sick leave. So in places like that, we call it the informal sector.
Now, let me get back to the Industrial Relations Court. Please give me some clarification here. You've said, if I'm not mistaken, that only if a domestic worker is employed through a company does the Industrial Relations Court recognize the rights of that employee, but is not the same if this employee is hired by a private household?
Yes, it's not the same. Unless it had to do with the minimum wage, you know, because they are covered under the minimum wage. So once it's a violation of the minimum wage, you could go to the ministry, you could go to the court. Because some people don't pay the sick leave when the domestic worker or the low-income worker gets sick. They don't pay the sick leave, which the sick leave had to be paid 14 days sick leave between the employer and the national insurance. So because there wasn't a national insurance, they never paid and all this, you know. And I want to say something that just recently a worker came to me and she said that she went to the national insurance because she was fired and she wanted to find out how much contribution the employer had paid for her on her behalf. And the NIS employee asked her, you have any proof that you work there with that company? She said, no. You don't have a pay slip? No. The woman told her, well, like NIB can't do anything for you. And I feel that is unfair because they have investigators but could go out there and investigate and find out the situation of workers out there. And that is not happening. So these are the things that we want to see these workers stepping up on behalf of low-income workers in this country.
Well, according to the ILO, the National Insurance Scheme is the perfect legal framework across the Caribbean and across the Caribbean islands for actually protecting the workers. However, there is a lack of laws or a lack of implementation of laws. Would you suggest that is true for Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, it's the same thing in Trinidad and Tobago because a lot of people are not paying the national insurance for the workers. So,
but is there any requirement? Is there any requirement for, in terms of the law, for private households to pay NIS for domestic workers? Are they required to do so by law? Because given the example that you previously suggested, an individual, the NIS can actually pull up on that employer if that is the case.
Right. Well, you see, the NIB do not deal with whether you're a worker or not a worker. They deal with if you are a wage earner. And we have a big sign up in the union, domestic workers are covered too. That is a sign by the national insurance that they had put on the newspaper years ago. And we have laminated it and put it up in the office. So anybody come who is a domestic worker, we show them that you have a right, your employer, to register you into the national insurance and to pay a contribution, take out your NIB, take out your money from your salary to pay the NIS and also to pay a contribution from the employer. I think it's 1/3 and 2/3.
Now, in terms of that particular legal framework, you said that you've been lobbying since at least 2016 for such conventions to be ratified. Where thus far, has there been any success at all? Or any ears, has it fallen on deaf ears?
No, the convention, we started to lobby in 2011 because that is when it was adopted in Switzerland at the ILO headquarters. So since that time, we continue to call on government to ratify. We have sent letters out to all the parliamentarians. We did it is enough what we didn't do. We even go out there and went by the parliament and hand them out leaflets, you know, calling on them. But we are being slighted by the government as though that we are not doing really anything. Domestic workers are nobody in this country. Yet we have so many domestic workers working in this country to ensure that people could go to work. Because if domestic workers were to stay home on one day, and that is what we have been calling on them for some years now, calling it the global strike all over the world. We are calling on domestic workers to strike on March the 8th, which is International Women's Day, so that people will see that when these domestic workers stop, the whole world will stop. People wouldn't be able to go out to work because they wouldn't have nobody to prepare the children clothes to go to school. They will have to stay home and see about the children and things like that. Because this work we do is valuable work. Mm-hmm. And we want the nation to understand that. Because a lot of people understand that, you know. But because they take the ignorance on the domestic worker, you know, so we continue to educate them and let them know the important work that they are doing to society.
Do you think that a strike will actually, you will get the support for a strike? Because if people go on strike, in the same sense over the COVID-19 pandemic, when lockdowns did not allow them to have a salary, going on strike will say that for a day or two they wouldn't earn a salary, which might not be beneficial for them. So do you think that you will gain the support that is necessary? Or you're hoping for?
Well, we have been trying, because in order to get something, sometimes you have to sacrifice to get it. You know, you don't get things easy. As they always say, black man don't get nothing easy. So we have to come together and see the situation, all the laws that the bars from getting decent work like all other workers, and the treatment that we have to face in the workplace, which is the household by employers, you know, and not until domestic workers realize the valuable work that they are doing, not only to the employer, but society in general, then I think that day will come.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Ida LeBlanc, thank you very much for joining me on AM Prime this morning, for giving us a better understanding. I know June 16th is the International Domestic Workers Day, and I suppose between now and then we would be getting further updates. But for now, that is where we'll have to leave it. And thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, before going, I just want to say that internationally, they are calling on employers of domestic workers to give them a day off, the domestic workers a day off on that day, June the 16th. All right, so that they could enjoy the day, and we continue to do our lobbying and hoping for domestic workers to be ratified, and the C-189 to be ratified to protect the domestic workers and get decent work like all other workers in this country. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, LeBlanc. Ms. LeBlanc, have a good day.
Yes,
that was the General Secretary of the National Union of Domestic Employees, Ms. Ida LeBlanc. Well, they're hoping for the ratification of the ILO Convention, which recognizes the equal treatment and fair rights, decent working conditions of domestic employees. They've been lobbying for since 2011, my apologies. But thus far, there's been no success. Even suggesting that a strike may be necessary. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made in order to get what is necessary in terms of your rights and your protections. But June 16th, which is the International Domestic Workers Day, they're calling on all employers across Trinidad and Tobago to give domestic workers a day off. But for now, that's where we'll have to leave it. We'll take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, well, we'll get into some more conversations this morning. Stay tuned to the program.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order, or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Beam. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah, hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here. Tickets available at Crosby's, Extra Foods Endeavour, Shogunus Main Road, Sangre Grande, Arima, Grand Bazaar, Mart's Liquor Mart, Diego Martin, Kenny's Sports Outlets, Athletes by the Park, and WESN.
Welcome back to AM Prime, and as you're probably aware of by now, if you've been following the show for the last few months, we here like to support young talent here in TNT, and certainly hope that even just a conversation can pave the way for greater success. Now, this morning, I'm joined by another young individual, specifically an author, whose new book, Red Like Love, is a young adult contemporary fiction novel that follows Caribbean teenager Adara Wells in her coming-of-age story. Well, the author of that novel, Miss Tamara Ali, is with us this morning via Zoom. Good morning, Miss Ali.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'll start by, having taken a look at your bio, you've described yourself as a professional daydreamer. But a professional daydreamer in itself could lead to rather inspirational things. Sometimes if you get too caught up, you might get lost. But is being a professional daydreamer also helpful in terms of you being an author, in terms of inspiration, even in terms of ideas?
Yes. Well, I call myself a professional daydreamer because I like to think I have a very big imagination, because daydreaming is not something that you can actually do professionally, So having a big imagination, of course, helps you with writing. It helps to inspire so much of the things that I write, because a lot of writing not only comes from viewing the outside world, but also thinking in your head, thinking up your own stories and your own ideas. So daydreaming definitely helps with my writing a lot.
But getting lost in a fantasy world might take you away from the true sense of reality, which in a way might also actually do you an injustice when actually writing a novel, especially on the Caribbean teenager, a coming-of-age story? Would you say that sometimes it's difficult to break out of that trance, or is it necessary that sometimes you stay in that trance in order to depict the ideal picture?
I believe it's good to have a balance of both, right? Especially with the types of book that I write. Even though it's fiction, most of it's contemporary, so it's based on more realistic settings, you know? So it's good to have a balance of things that I imagine that came out of my head, and also writing about things that I actually witness, I go through, I know people who do go through, so that the story could be more relatable. So it's good to have a balance of both daydreaming and reality.
So at what age did you actually start writing? Whether it be novels, whether it be short stories, at what age did you actually realize, well, I have a talent here and I really enjoy doing this?
I would say maybe at the age of 8. You know, both of my parents are writers, so I was kind of born with the natural interest in writing. But when I was about 8, 9 years old, I started writing song lyrics. And then eventually I transitioned into short stories, and I tried to write a couple stories when I was about 12, 13 years old, a couple novels. But at the time I didn't have the discipline to complete one. So it wasn't until I was 16 I started Red Like Love, and I actually tried to finish it to complete the manuscript, which I did.
And you suggested that you were born to 2 writers. Your mother and father are writers. That must have been quite an experience, especially starting a novel at the age of 16, always being behind you, but in the good way, I suppose.
Yes, I mean, it had its ups and downs. For one, they were both very supportive, of course, because they love to see me write and live the dreams that they also, you know, want to live or do live. My mother also is an author. But the downside was probably the comparisons of when I wrote the book. People would be like, oh, you're a writer now like your mommy. And it's like, yes, but I want to be known as me, you know, my writing style, not necessarily like her, you know what I mean?
And what would you describe your writing style as?
I try to keep it very young and fresh so that it's relatable to Caribbean teenagers, as well as so that I can attract teenagers who don't normally read a lot, because that's my goal, is to make a lot of Caribbean teenagers read more. So I try to write in ways that they read it and it doesn't feel as though you're reading a book. It feels like, you know, you're hearing a story from a friend, or you're reading, or you're watching a show, you know?
Mm-hmm. Now, this particular story, Red Like Love, follows a Caribbean teenager, Dara Wells, and her coming-of-age story. Now, most might argue that Caribbean stories focus on some form of struggle, as they would say. But precisely in this novel, what is the struggle? As a teenager, there's so many things that you go through. What does this novel focus on?
Yes, well, the first thing that you said, that a lot of Caribbean books are focused on struggles. I agree with that. And that's why that was one of the inspirations behind me writing this book, because I wanted there to be more Caribbean books that focus less on things like poverty and those types of struggles, and more modern day and less complicated struggles, you know, the teenager struggles that we think is a big deal now, but really isn't 10 years later. So the struggles in this book Adara is facing, she's going through her first love, which comes with, of course, your first heartbreak. And she's also in secondary school, so she is definitely dealing with a little bit of bullying and trying to fit in with her peers, trying to get boys' attention and this validation. And another one of her struggles in the book is also her home life. She is living with only one parent, which I think is relatable to a lot of Caribbean teenagers. So she definitely has to deal with how her family and growing up is going to impact her love life now. You know, from how do you learn what a healthy relationship is when you don't grow up viewing one?
But as a teenager, now, though you yourself would have gone through these experiences or some experiences, how is it that you're able to actually delve into the deep psychological issues as you've just described, if you as the author perhaps have not necessarily experienced that?
Well, for this book, I really tried to, at the beginning, I used my life as heavy inspiration. Of course, as I edited and I went through it, it became more of the character's story and less of mine. But as far as the psychological things, the emotional side of things, I really looked into how I felt at certain times in my life and tried to mirror that in the book for the character.
Mm-hmm. Now you've also mentioned Caribbean stories focusing a lot on various issues of struggles, but do you think that there are enough stories out there that focus on the struggles that a Trinbago teen might actually face? Do you think that enough is actually done when you're putting pen to paper to truly describe the situations and scenarios that they might actually go through?
I don't think that there is enough books about Caribbean teenagers. There are some out there. The Trinidad book, the Trinidad writers it's growing. You know, there are lots of Trinidad writers, a lot of Caribbean writers. So the Caribbean stories are growing, but I don't think that there's a lot of Caribbean teenage stories. So hopefully there will be more in the future. I am planning on writing a lot more and to showcase just way more Caribbean teen stories because we have so much to share, you know, so hopefully there will be more in the future.
Now, you're saying hopefully there will be more in the future. Do you think you'll continue to go on the line of fiction, though it may be based on some form of reality?
Yes, I think that for my future books, I definitely want to stick with fiction. I just believe that it's a lot more fun to write, you know, a lot less pressure than writing nonfiction as well. So I definitely will stick to fiction in the future. I'm not sure if I will stick to young adult. I want to stick to young adult teenage books, but you know, as I get older, I wonder if I will lose the connection to teenagers with writing. So I will stick with it for as long as I can, but I don't ever want to become one of those writers who they write about teenage life and they haven't been a teenager since way back when, so the book isn't really that realistic, you know.
So is it that you're recognizing that the cultures and even the identities of teenagers across the Caribbean tend to evolve?
Yes, I mean, the teenage culture always evolves. You know, there are always different slangs and different things that teenagers do every 5 years. Not once, 10 years from now, the things that were cool and things that we used to say when I was a teenager is not going to be the same, you know.
I'm reading the synopsis of your book. And I'm looking at something here where it says, the young Trinidadian girl discovering her sexuality in a heteronormative society. Now, some people might say, you're stepping on some toes there. It's a very sensitive topic and not one that is acceptable. Some parents might say, I'm not really interested in my teenager reading this book, and I'm not necessarily going to support it. But is it that you see the need to actually break such stigmas and have such conversations because there is a lack of progress?
Yes. I'm a huge advocate for LGBT plus rights. So I know that it could be a little much of a touchy subject, you know, and that I might not get certain support from it or I might get certain backlash. But I am prepared for that because one of the points of the book is also to talk about queer Caribbean teenagers and, you know, normalize LGBT plus life.
But could you really normalize something that still, after all the advocacy, is not necessarily accepted?
Yes, I know that it might not be accepted, but I mean, that's not going to stop me from telling these stories because accepted or not, these people still exist. You know, there are still these stories to be told, whether it's accepted or it's liked or it's normalized or not. They're still there and their stories still need to be told. And I will tell them no matter who gives me the backlash.
Now, taking a look at your cover, which was actually on our series not too long ago, beautiful, by the way, the artwork, but the title, Red Like Love, what are you referring to exactly?
So when I was thinking of the title for this book, I was going through a lot of different options in my head. I knew that I wanted love to be somewhere in the title. The color red was a main theme from the beginning, because when I think about the color of love, I think of red. Because love isn't always happy, fairy tales, kisses and hugs, and that's not always what you think of when you think of red. Sometimes you think of red and it's blood, or it's evil, or it's passion, and that's a lot of what also love can be like. It can also be intense, passionate, heartbreaking, blood-wrenching, So that's why I ended up with Red Like Love. And it also comes together in a chapter in the book where the main character has a sentence and has a little item with her that makes you understand the title better once you read it.
That's very interesting. Where do you hope this book in particular, where do you hope it goes? Where do you hope it ends up? There's always an end goal. What is your end goal?
I just hope that Caribbean teenagers and queer Caribbean teenagers can read this book and feel heard and feel seen. I also hope that it can open up the conversations of a young person figuring out their sexuality and their identity, and that's not always a bad thing, as well as young people going through love. I think a lot of times people feel like, oh, well, you're young, you don't know what love is, and you don't know anything, you're not supposed to be focusing on this and boyfriend and this and that. But of course they will, and that's as a normal part of life. I also hope that my book and my future books can encourage more Caribbean teenagers to read. I feel like if they see themselves in stories, they will be more likely to want to read the stories and want to read more books. So that's another hope of mine. And lastly, I also hope that this book just puts Trinidad even more on the map. I want it to go international, have international sales, so that Trinidad and its culture, because there's a lot of Trinidadian culture featured in the book as well, so that it goes global.
Well, that is a goal that we all support and we will all cheer for. But it also, not to get deeper into conversation because we're running out of time, but it also sounds as though it's a sort of novel of a teenager trying to help other teenagers, because those teenagers may not get the help that is necessary or the understanding that is necessary, even by those who have gone through what they have, but are now walking in the shoes of an adult.
Yes, it's definitely for Caribbean teenagers by a Caribbean teenager. There are little things in the book that the main character goes through, like little things, lessons that she learns. So I also hope that Caribbean teenagers, if they are reading it and at that time they might need the same guidance, that the main character's story can also help guide their real life story.
Well, Mr. Marali, congratulations on your self-published Red Like Love book. The story rather is very interesting, and even the title itself is rather peculiar to the mind. But as I close, you said something there about hoping that it will encourage and inspire more young authors to go through with their goals, with their aspirations, with their dreams, but also to get more teenagers to read. Is it that, could you write a novel without not reading? Could you write a manuscript, a script or a novel without not reading books before?
I would very much encourage reading first. I think once you read, it not only opens up your imagination, but you also get to see the structure of a book, how a book is set up, and you will also learn new words and new phrases and new ways to introduce characters and develop a story. So reading definitely will help your writing.
Well, Ms. Tamara Ali, thank you very much for joining me on AM Prime this morning. Always happy to support a young individual who's trying to make a difference in more ways than one. And yours through writing, it's amazing at such a young age you're out there writing books. There are many like you who don't even have the courage to push through with such a goal. And I can only hope that everybody takes some form of inspiration from your story. Not just the part about being a professional daydreamer or the Caribbean fiction novel, but the story of who Tamara Ali is as a young author. Thank you very much. Congratulations and all the best to you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, see, that's the thing. Again, I keep emphasizing there's young talent out there with a world of ideas. They need the support. And I can only hope that sometimes having that little conversation here on AM Prime can just break that ice and give them that stepping stone that is necessary. But Trinidad and Tobago, you have a lot to be proud of. And Tamara Ali is certainly one of those citizens. Folks, we take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll get into some regional updates this morning. Stay tuned to the program.
Good evening and welcome to the business.
The artists you'll meet. The sounds will astonish you. Superb voices, new artists, simply refreshing. Celebrate amazing. May 27th, North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Festival grounds Blanchishes. Born here, played here. Tickets available at Crosby's, Extra Foods Endeavour, Shogunas Main Road, Sangre Grande, Arima, Grand Bazaar, Mart's Liquor Mart, Diego Martin, Kenny's Sports Outlets, Athletes by the Park, and WESN.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital. Welcome back to AM Primer. Let's get into some regional updates now. We start with the islands of Amplia and Barbuda, where 12 girls involved in a brawl at Clare Hall Secondary School on the last day of the pre-Easter term. So this was actually something that took place a while back. But last week, they had a meeting with the Ministry of Education and have signed behavioural contracts. As part of the conditions, they are to engage in community service. Well, I picked this particular regional update because of what's taking place here in TNT. So let's understand a bit more from this report.
Director of Education Claire Brown explaining some of the key outcomes from the meeting of the Education Ministry last Friday.
The Ministry of Education would have determined that all of the children would be placed on behavioral contracts, would be subjected to counseling, and they too, each of the 12, would be put to some form of community service, will be asked to undertake some form of community service. They were third formers, fourth formers, and fifth formers.
12 girls were involved in the March 31 fracas of the school. The meeting of the Education Ministry last Friday followed the submission of a detailed report from school officials of what transpired in addition to recommendations. The Director of Education explained behavioral contracts have been signed by students with their parents.
And they understand that they were required to sign a contract. And the behavioral contract that we required them to sign talked about coming to school every day, going to classes on time, staying on the school grounds, be prepared with the appropriate materials, have a positive attitude, and focus on learning, take responsibility for personal belongings and respect other people's property, not engage in any form of bullying, inclusive of cyberbullying, resolve conflicts, seek to resolve conflicts peacefully.
1 third former and 2 fourth formers have been identified by the school as major players in the brawl. It has been made clear to them in no uncertain terms what is expected of them going forward.
The ministry will go to the ultimate in the event there is the last resort punishment allowed by law in the event that there is any major breach. We understand that we have to counsel, we have to encourage, we have to support, because they're still learning. And so the ministry is not jumping to any kind of last resort punishment at this time.
Meanwhile, in relation to fifth formers involved in the brawl, they have been told there can be no breach between now and graduation day.
They will get their certificate to say they're leaving school, but they will not be allowed to participate in the graduation exercise. They need to keep the peace.
The education director says the ministry will ensure that the counselors at the school are supported by the ministry's counseling unit.
Well, Jim, reading that report, I'm wondering if it's something that we can actually apply here in TNT, given the level of indiscipline that we're seeing within our school systems from students across the board. Now, fortunately, we haven't had much reports of serious instances of violence taking place within the primary school setting, more so the secondary school setting, but it starts from the lowest of forms, go all the way up. The thing is, do you think that some parents would actually allow their children to sign such contracts with the Ministry of Education? Do you think children are even capable of abiding by such contracts? Well, that's something that we could explore, but it's something that is adopted in Antigua and Barbuda, and part of the contract, as mentioned, is having to do community service, which, let's be real, a lot of these teenagers down here could actually get some form of discipline, or at least I hope they get some form of discipline from some form of community service. Anyway, moving on now to the island of St. Lucia. Leader of the opposition, Alan Chastany, has accused the government of making life more difficult for the citizens of the country. The opposition leader spoke against the backdrop of the government's proposed 2.5% health and security levy. Let's take a look at this.
The SLP administration has been accused by opposition leader Alan Chastany of not living up to its mantra of putting the people first. According to him, the government has failed to unburden citizens who are feeling the pressure of the high cost of living. Referencing the economic indicators of 2022, which showed positive growth in the country's economy, the opposition leader observed that the SLP administration could have done more to ease the squeeze over the past year.
You had the ability to do something about it. You earned the money. You said you were elected to help people. Help them. Why would you allow the gas price to go past $14.95? Why would you allow cooking gas to go to $22?
Furthermore, Shastny bitterly criticized the current administration for wanting to introduce a new tax to add to the expenses of citizens. To drive home his point, the opposition leader used a visual aid to demonstrate how much groceries can currently be purchased for $170.
This is what $170 is going to buy you. That's what it's going to buy you. Toothpaste. For 1 month, huh? Eggs. Cricks. Cheese. Mr. Speaker, $22. And based on the new tax that's coming in, by July 1st, that's going to be higher. So when the guy said he has to use, was it lime to put under his arms? Maybe he's right. Women, Pampers, sanitation items, all of those items are going to be increasing as of July 1st.
Moreover, the opposition leader also pointed out that no advance notice was given to citizens about the health and security levy.
So everybody who's now put all their pricing out for the next year and a half, all their prices are going up. What they're paying on liquor, what they're paying on chemicals, what they're paying on supplies. And nobody knows how the tax is being implemented. If it's being implemented at the port, that means we're paying VAT on it. So is it really an increase in the service charge from 6% to 8.5%? Is that what's going on? Mr. Speaker, I had to do this because the Prime Minister said he doesn't go to the grocery store.
The opposition leader has called on the government to live up to its mantra and to do right by citizens. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
I thought that was rather brilliant that the opposition leader actually decided to go to the grocery to pick out a few basic items, then bring it to the house and actually highlight the cost of these items. Anyway, let's move on very quickly to our last regional update, and that is from the Republic of Guyana, where though there have been no recorded cases of measles, Guyana is hoping to implement the use of microneedle patches to immunize against the disease and decrease possible occurrences. This report from Guyana.
Technology offers quite a number of solutions. What we should look at is maybe how we can adopt this. And perhaps in this region, we can be among the early adopters of this technology. As I said, it has been used in medicines, delivery of medicines, but I think it's the first time we're working on it to make sure that we can deliver vaccines in this way.
That was Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony as he addressed the opening ceremony of the Measles Micropatches meeting, which was held at the Marriott Hotel on Wednesday. According to the Pan American Health Organization, measles is a highly contagious viral disease which affects mostly children and is transmitted through droplets from the nose, mouth, or throat of infected persons. In his address, Dr. Anthony said since the current measles vaccine requires continuous refrigerated storage and the use of a needle and syringe injection, very often there is the need to reconstitute the vaccine using a diluent, which can be technological and problematic. As such, he said the microneedle patches can be a breakthrough and cut waste associated with needle injections.
The point is that sometimes these things can be quite technical. Requires training when we want to get it out to our population, and that's a big challenge. Also, what happens when we vaccinate the traditional way is that you have to establish a very elaborate cold chain, and in a country like Guyana, we know the challenges. And so when you put the patch on, it's like a little plaster that you put on, and that's it. Those little needle-like projections absorb into the skin, and there goes your medication.
Meanwhile, in brief remarks, Chief of the PAHU's Comprehensive Family Immunization Unit, Daniel Salas, said globally there has been a decline in the immunization against measles. Over the past 3 years, Salas said more than 7 million children were unvaccinated. He said while more than 2 million children were vaccinated against measles in 2021, some 1.7 million were unvaccinated.
The challenge is to identify those barriers and missed opportunities for vaccination that can be addressed by this new vaccine. It is important to inform the micro-array cancer developers which are the barriers to immunization to facilitate the most expeditious development of MR and MAP candidates that would address the greatest and most urgent public needs in our countries.
The two-day workshop will see countries including Trinidad, Suriname and Barbados participating in discussions as to how the new technology can be utilized to eliminate measles and other non-communicable disease in the coming years. Reporting for the newsroom, Sharda Bacchus.
I wonder if people would actually be open and willing to take a patch rather than a microneedle patch rather than an actual injection via syringe. We've had a lot of hesitation over the last couple of years as it relates to any form of a vaccination. So now this is a new microneedle patch. I wonder what the response will be like from the public. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we'll continue with this morning's conversations. Stay tuned to the program.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The perfect mix of news, current affairs, talk, debate, mature discussions, comedy and sports. Only at WESN, the content capital.
Welcome back to AM Prime. Well, the University of the West Indies, well, they've laid the first bricks and mortar for the construction of the $8 million chocolate factory, which is due to be completed, or at least suggested, around 2024. Now, to speak more about this particular development, I welcome to the program the Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal for the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies, Professor Rosemary Bell Antoine. Good morning, Professor. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'll start the conversation by asking you, you suggested that UE is now one step closer to fulfilling a dream that will further enhance national development. Now, we can have our debates about the state of our cocoa industry, but from the University of the West Indies standpoint, how is this one step closer to the goals of national development?
Well, one of the goals surely is towards improving on agriculture, food security, and sustainability. So these are some of the goals that we also share at the university. So when I talked about that, I was thinking about that as well as in terms of UWE's own contributions to innovation and being in the community. There are so many goals that I think we can contribute to what I consider to be genuine national development.
Now, you've also said that it will generate revenue and speak to the bigger issues of our time. Those bigger issues, are they what you just mentioned?
Yes, food security is one, but also climate change and climate justice challenges that we face. Having an industry like a cocoa industry in a modern environment where you're going to be using the latest technologies and know-how, but in a frame which pays respect to the environment. Those are certainly important issues that I think we need to work toward.
If you could just kind of elaborate on what you mean by climate justice. That's a term that's not often heard or not often understood.
Yes, you're quite right. We need to do more on it. So the climate change discussion, we think about it in terms of science only sometimes, but it's not just about science. What we've realized, and of course, University of the West Indies has been working on climate, one of the first universities to work on climate issues. But climate justice speaks to the broader social issues that surround the changes that we see in the environment and the challenges that we see in the environment. It speaks to things like human rights. It speaks to things like equality and equity. When we make changes, that we don't make people more vulnerable, because what research has shown is as climate changes occur, it is often the most vulnerable who are at disadvantage the most. We are all disadvantaged, but of course, if your home is more fragile, for example, it would be more susceptible to floods, etc. Your crops, the farmers, they have a harder time, things like that. So climate justice attempts to look at these broader issues of equity and justice within that frame.
And of course, the construction of this factory marks a one step closer to that particular fight. But you just mentioned equity and equality. Precisely how would this help, if it does help at all, with global trade structures?
Yes, and that is something I mentioned, which again we don't often talk about. And I specifically mentioned it at the launch because we have had a historical tradition going back since slavery, really, of trade which advantages the rich North countries more than it does us. And we are growing the goodies often or almost all the time, whether it be sugar, whether it be bananas, whether it be the same cocoa, etc. But we do not reap the full benefits because trade is inherently unequal in our world. And so when you do industry now, which is based in agriculture, you should always be looking toward improving that value added. So this factory is not just about the cocoa beans, and of course we are number one Trinitario beans in the world. We are one of the top and the highest priced beans in the world because of the taste and so on. But we want to go further. We want to create products from the cocoa so that when you create products, whether it be cocoa wine, whether it be chocolate and a whole host of other things, then you have a better chance of getting more value, more money for your product, and it puts you on a more even playing field. It's also about negotiating better prices with companies that have a conscience, and there are more of them these days, international ones. And the Cocoa Research Center, which is really at the heart of this development. I mean, I'm here talking, but all the credit should go to the Cocoa Research Center and its leader, Dr. Path Umaharan. I'm sure you would have heard of him.
Yes.
Yes. So they have been, I'm just there as a facilitator already, but they have been doing all this work for decades. And so they also have, at this point in time, some very important links with international companies, chocolate companies like Lindt, for example, some of the top in the world. And there is that understanding that what we call fair trading and so on is part of that equation that we want to fit ourselves into.
Now, something here, our cocoa is renowned around the world. In fact, Cadbury used to export, and still, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of our cocoa for their products. But that being said, a lot of the products that are sold around the world are very high in sugar content. Is there a market for our local chocolate which focuses more on the depth and the pureness of the actual cocoa that is used in its product. Is there a market for that globally?
Yes, and in fact, I was very excited to hear the minister speak, Honorable Paula Gopi-Schoon, because she gave some statistics as to the value of that very question you asked. She gave some of the statistics, and from all accounts, it is still a very valuable product, chocolate, etc. There's a lot of money in high caliber, good quality chocolate, the top of the line of the market, which is where we are pitching 70% cocoa in our chocolate, which is a very high percent, which improves taste. So it's one of those niche markets, perhaps not so niche as before. I think everybody now knows about high quality dark chocolate. So that's where we are pitching, and from all appearances, there's a huge billion-dollar market for it.
Now, I know you also mentioned the benefits to local farmers with the establishment and the construction of this factory. But what about local manufacturers? Could there be partnerships with local manufacturers so that they themselves can develop products with this particular factory and perhaps boost their exports?
I'm glad you asked that, because we are also talking to manufacturers. The manufacturing sector in Trinidad is not as large as you think it is. It's fairly small. But I think there is some interest, and we are more than willing to partner. In fact, this is part of our broader entrepreneurial drive, as you probably would have heard. The chocolate factory is one. There are other things, sealants, marine sealants, roofing compounds, and so on. And in these endeavors, we have come to the understanding, we've saying it out there, the university cannot do it alone. And yes, we value partnerships with government, and we do have strong partnerships with government. For example, I want to emphasize that government gave us $5 million for the monies for the chocolate factory, and we're extremely grateful for that. But going forward, we believe that the trick really is in very vibrant, mutually beneficial partnerships with the private sector. And perhaps it's a way to encourage those in the country who can get into the manufacturing sector, because we tend to be more retail sector than manufacture. Yeah. But there's a lot of benefit for that, and we are willing to enter into partnerships.
Well, you mentioned the private sector, but you also mentioned this is part of the entrepreneurial drive. Do you think that young people now are more interested in agriculture, or is there a way to get them more interested in agriculture? This particular endeavor is one step in doing so.
Yes, very good question. And I have said and I've told Prof. Pat, as we call him, because he's basically on his own in terms of the CRC, is an independent unit. But I have said to him that it's not enough for us to succeed at making chocolate. What we want to do is to revitalize and revolutionize the agricultural aspects of it, as we have done in the chocolate making. We revolutionize the industry there. And that means that his unit has to work with the Faculty of Agriculture to do that. We have the only Faculty of Agriculture in the UB and indeed in the region, with a very proud history, and we have the capabilities. And so we need to be able to encourage young people in particular to get into agriculture. Agriculture is not the only, there's some part of it, yes, but it's not the sort of the only, the old-fashioned way of growing things that we think we know. So there's a lot of opportunity for new types of agriculture, aquaponics, etc., new methods. We have been doing a lot of research at the university, things like resistance to pests and soil, work on the soil, etc. So there are lots of opportunities for young people to enter the agricultural sector and to do well. And we want to be, and we already are, part of that whole movement. We want to accentuate it, and we want to join hands with government in that endeavor, because I think we are beginning slowly to recognize that it is the only way for a secure future.
Now, you also said that we have the resources. the only faculty of agriculture amongst the University of the West Indies when you speak about campuses throughout the Caribbean. But whilst we may have such resources, do we actually have the expertise that is necessary to push forward with such projects? Yes, Professor Uhamaran is part of it, and the Cocoa Research Facility, but is it that the expertise that is required is there here in TNT?
Yes, we have, and we have tremendous expertise, even as perhaps we've lost over the years some of our academic staff. We've had some attrition, but nevertheless, we still have a powerhouse in the faculty, and they're already doing a lot of work in the OECS and elsewhere. So they are a treasure here. We have some world-class researchers, professors, and so on in various areas, very varied, because don't forget they also do animal husbandry and these sorts of things. And one of the good things about the university, I always say, is that we can be multidisciplinary, which in my view is the way for the future, so that we have some of our scientists working with our agriculturalists, together to create solutions. Even with our doctors, that is, say, nutrition, working in agriculture, there are so many possibilities, and we have world-class researchers, and I don't say that lightly, people who are recognized as among the best in their field. And you probably know, and I suppose I should always remind everyone, that university is now ranked, since we entered the rank, it's the top 1.5% in the world, and of course number one in the Caribbean. But apart from that, we have individual researchers who are winning prizes, who are known out there in their field. So I don't think we should question the quality. We could do it some more quantity, we could do it some more money to hire some more people for sure. That is a big challenge we have. But certainly quality is there, interest is there, know-how is there.
So if you're concerned that we have the quality of the individuals, the quantity is always debated and more action is needed, do you think that whilst this factory is an opportunity and perhaps a flagship, do you think that it could survive given the current climate and how the climate is ever changing and so unpredictable?
You mean climate as a physical climate, or?
Yes, the climate as in the physical climate, as well as globally the adaptation towards different tastes as well.
Well, some years ago I was at a meeting, I think it was an OES meeting, and I observed people around me. And I said, if I were ever to become a dictator in this world, what I would do if I wanted to get people to do what I wanted, I would tell them you can't have any chocolate, because there are so many chocoholics. I don't think, I remember, that was when I learned that they are artificial chocolates. I didn't realize they were doing these modified things. Of course, ours is natural. But the point I'm making is I don't think chocolate will ever go out of taste or ever go out of style. People love chocolate. There will always be a market for great chocolate. And although the climate itself, in terms of the physical climate, is changing, yes, and that's part of why we have to adapt some of the methods I mentioned to you as to how to grow things, because part of our mission is also to improve the production of the cocoa, because it has fallen, of course, over the years.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, that's why I mentioned to you, we have to find new ways, use innovations, and so whether it's greenhouses, etc., to grow food, chocolate, to grow cocoa, anything. We all have to think of that. We all have to pay more attention to how we treat our hillsides, cutting down all the trees, how we treat, when we're building something, we cut down every blade of grass, every tree in order to build a house, which of course not just destroys the environment, but makes it more insecure in terms of flood. So these are big, big questions, which the university must work with the government of the day to also solve these problems. So it's not a single sort of unilateral, insular type of issue. It's multifaceted. But yes, ultimately, I do think that the cocoa and the cocoa industry can and will survive. And it has survived many, many years. It has declined only because some people left the industry, but it hasn't declined in terms of its worth and its value. So I do think it will survive, yes.
People leaving the industry, this will allow for people to come back into the industry, seeing that the actual investment is taking place.
Exactly. That's what we hope, and I feel pretty confident that, especially if we can continue and enhance these partnerships, public-private sector partnerships, that young people take notice, and it's a kind of a sexy industry, I think. I mean, my best friend is a chocolatier. She's an engineer, but she's also a chocolatier. She went to the courses at UB, etc. And there are many people who they may be looking on now and saying, So I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a local market, there's a regional market, and there's an international market.
And how integral are these public-private sector partnerships? Not only how integral are these public-private sector partnerships, not only for this particular industry, but generally all around? How integral is it in forging a way forward?
Well, my personal view is that it is absolutely vital. This is before I came on. I know the university was often attempting to do things on their own, and there are many things that we can do on our own. I mean, all of these innovations and inventions, and so we did on our own, and we can do a lot. But I think once we get into this side of it and the commercialization and the marketing, and so that we should not and possibly cannot do it alone. If we do it alone, it will take too much effort. We are not sort of built that way. Yeah, so I think we will have enormous value in these partnerships. So for me personally, my view is that they are absolutely vital.
Professor Rosemary Bell-Antoine, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning, and I'd just like to openly and publicly express my appreciation that you're not a dictator, because I can't live in a world without chocolate.
I see what I told you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All your viewers.
Yes. Do have a good day and keep well. Well, that was Professor Rosemary Bell-Antoine, Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal at the St. Augustine campus for the University of the West Indies. The new construction of the cocoa, the $8 million chocolate factory. It's been dubbed as the UE Chocolate Couverture Factory, and that is expected to be completed by January 2024. Just to give you some information, the factory will have the capacity to actually produce roughly 200 tons of chocolate. That's amazing, and always supporting local. Now, I'm well aware that we already have a lot of local cocoa products that are available, and even if you go to the shelves in Japan, in England, Germany, they are available, and there is a great appreciation for it. But what does this mean for the evolution of the cocoa sector here in TNT? Because cocoa farmers are arguing that enough is not being done. Even though that you're seeing these new ventures taking place, they still feel that the support that they need, and even the remunerations for their efforts, the rewards for all the products that they sow, well, they don't feel it. So maybe this is just one step to resolving that, or maybe, just maybe, this is overshadowing some lingering problems. Well, perhaps it's our duty and responsibility here at AM Prime to hear the views of cocoa farmers, and we'll certainly work on that for another edition of this program. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where I conclude, and this is where I leave you. It's a beautiful day. I hope you enjoyed. It was a great weekend, actually. Rather hot, but perfect beach days. So I hope whatever you did, you enjoyed it, and you beat the heat. But have a great day ahead, and here's to a great week ahead. And thank you for starting your day with me. It's always an honor, always a privilege that I get to share that with you. And I really hope that you have a good day ahead. May it be productive. And always remember, you can be the mature, rational individual, disciplined, because we can make TNT all a bit sweeter if we try. But bright and early tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, I'll see you again for another edition of AM Prime. I'm Keaton Shaw. Bye-bye.
WESN.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah. Hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here. Tickets available at Crosby's, Extra Foods Endeavour, Shogunas Main Road, Sangre Grande, Arima, Grand Bazaar, Mart's Liquor Mart, Diego Martin, Kenny's Sports Outlets, Athletes by the Park, and WESN.
I'm Andy Johnson, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
The perfect mix of news, current affairs, talk, debate, mature discussions, comedy and sports. Only at WESN, the content capital.